So, my name is Stan Askren. I am the retired CEO of H&I. The new CEO is Jeff Lawrence right there, if you'd like to meet him while he's here. I still am chairman of the board for a few months, I think, and I've been a member of the Iowa Business Council since 2015. Excuse me, 2005. So it's been 15 years. And I feel strongly about what the Iowa Business Council is about, and we'll chat about that. But I'm here to open this session up. I, like you, am proud to call myself an Iowan and feel privileged to have lived and worked in this state for a very long time. My parents were born in this state. My children were raised in this state, educated in this state. My spouse was raised in this state, educated in this state, and this is truly a great place to live and work. And I think, though, that's not enough to have been a great place to live and work. The world is moving quickly. The other economies are moving quickly, and we can't stand still. If we stand still, we run the risk of losing this great capability and asset we have called the state of Iowa and Muscatine, Iowa as well. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Iowa Business Council. It's an organization that was founded in 1985. The purpose back then was the governor, I believe it was Governor Ray, called upon the business leaders in this state to help diversify the economy beyond just agriculture. And so the state leaders came together and formed a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. Iowa Business Council is comprised of the 23 largest organizations, employers in the state. It's a diverse group of all the way from manufacturing to retail to healthcare, all the way around, and it is the leaders of those organizations that come together and help talk about how do we make the state a better place to live, a better place to work, and those two concepts are interrelated. You can't be a great place to work if you're not a great place to live, and if you're not a great place to work, you can't be a great place to live. There include Ruan. Ben McLean is here, the president of the Iowa Business Council. Ben, where are you? I saw you earlier. There's Ben. Introduce yourself to Ben. Ben is the CEO of Ruan. Georgia Van Gundy, executive director, is here. Georgia, I'm going to introduce her later, but wave Georgia. And then we have several other business leaders. Gage Kent is a part of this organization. Gage, unfortunately, had another business commitment, couldn't be here. But Gage is a formidable, important member of this organization as we talk about the policy and strategy to make this state a more vital, higher vitality economy. So the council members are broad-based. You can see here on the screen here, we have certainly the central part of the state covered, but we also have the east coast covered, Muscatine, and then also the west coast over there in Lamar's and south of Iowa. And so we have a good representation of urban, rural, east coast, west coast, central sort of Iowa issues. And our vision at Iowa Business Council is to elevate the long-term economic vitality to achieve prosperity for Iowans and Iowans. And it isn't just about the businesses being more successful. It truly is making the state, a better place to live and to work. And I think what's interesting is I have spent the last 15 years participating is to see the hearts of the leaders of these large organizations. They come with a mindset around a higher purpose. What do we need to do to truly make this a great place to live? And I think it's impressive as you spend time around these individuals to see how they think and how they operate and where they commit their resources and time to make this a better state. And our mission at Iowa Business Council is to serve as a catalyst for economic growth in Iowa. And that really leads us to this session then. And I appreciate your time and your willingness to come and share your thoughts of what we need to be doing as a state to improve our economic vitality. So this forum has come together. Georgia, I'm going to introduce you. Please come, and I'll let you handle this from here. And thank you so much. I'll be around. Love to.
Okay, so can you hear me in the back? Because I also am blessed with a very loud voice if I need to use one. So if you can't hear me, let me know. Good? All right, excellent. Well, thanks, Stan. I appreciate you opening up and talking a little bit about the Business Council and what our purpose is here today. You know, as Stan talked about, our mission is to think about policies that will elevate the economic vitality in our state. And I think he did a great job of also talking about the fact that, yes, we represent 23 of some of the larger organizations in our state, but we are also all the way across Iowa in all 99 counties. So as our members take a look at how do we develop this policy, one thing that is unique to us is that we put together some great data that our members then take a look at and determine what are the policies that we need to be moving forward to move our state ahead. So you'll look on the screen up there, we have Iowa's competitive dashboard. And then within that dashboard, you see 5 key economic factors that we take a look at. And these factors are consistent among all the states in the United States. So that way, we can take a look at how does Iowa rank with other states, and then how do we make improvements so that we move the needle in some of those competitive factors that we have there. So these are some of the high-level initiatives that we have. I will tell you the other piece of data that we have is our economic survey. Our economic survey we've been putting out for over 10 years. And that economic survey is from our members' perspective and looking at the economy. And we ask them key factors. You know, as you do an outlook of how the economy looks, are you planning on more sales? Will you be hiring more, making more capital investment within our communities? So that's more of a local flavor of the data that we put out, and a lot of lawmakers and other thought leaders around the state look for that report when it comes out, because then again, it's from that business perspective and those people on the ground and our look at the economy and how it's impacting how we do business. So we have that that's more local. We have our dashboard that again has these 5 factors that are more national in perspective. And so on the next page then what we have is from those 5 key factors, we take a look at what are those policy recommendations that we want to move forward. Not all of them are legislative policy recommendations. Some of them are just how do we do more public-private partnerships within our communities, like we're going to talk about today, to implement policies that are needed to improve our economic growth. So you will see those, you know, no shock to anybody here, workforce is a big issue that our members have talked about. While they see the economy as strong in our state, one of those barriers to economic growth for them is being able to find the right talent within our communities to hire. So you'll see within the first, if you go back to the policy, you'll see within those first 2, we really talk about how do we create those public-private partnerships to address our workforce issue, talk about the career pathways that are out there, how do we engage students at an early level so that they know those different jobs that we have available. And then we have other key policy issues under governance, health and wellness, and demographics and diversity. So then we're going to go into just a high level again, some of the other factors that lead into that high level factor that you took a look at. So under economic growth, you can see that we are very competitive when it comes to our labor force participation rate. And competitive means that we are ranked 10th or higher. So that sounds great, but when you couple that with an unemployment rate of 2.6%, we don't have a lot of people to draw on when we're trying to fill the jobs that we have within our state. So while we're competitive there, sometimes it's not the best factor in what we're trying to accomplish. And then you see in the state science and technology index, we rank poor. And in our state, one of the things that really brings us down is our entrepreneurial climate. And for years, the policymakers have looked at different initiatives to try to improve that entrepreneurial climate. And it is important that we continue to look at how can we foster a positive entrepreneurial climate? Because it's those small businesses around the state that are going to help revitalize our rural communities. So it is important that we look at policies that help move us, hopefully out of poor, at least into the average factor there. So if you go then next to our education and workforce, again, pretty average. Our ACT scores were competitive, but where we're ranking low is in our education attainment in bachelor's degrees. So folks past high school going on and getting different skills to move them into jobs. And so our recommendations there are forming different public-private partnerships that can help drive that. And one thing I'll talk about really briefly is the Future Ready Iowa Initiative. It's an initiative that the governor put forward and that she would like to see, and we would all like to see. 70% of Iowans have some form of training by the year 2025 past high school, which aligns directly with that metric. I will tell you from the Business Council's perspective, and a lot of the conversations that our members have had, we've put forward a couple of initiatives in this past year. One of them is the Business Education Alliance. So we've talked about how do we bring business and education together, but all levels of education. So we have two university presidents, we have two presidents of the community colleges, we have two school superintendents, and we have one private university president at the table with 10 of our CEOs really talking about not only about how do we address our workforce issues of today, but then how do we look forward? How are we more proactive? Where do we want our economy to be in 5 to 8 years from now? And then what does that mean from a workforce perspective and the type of pools of workers that we need, and start building that career path for those individuals. So that's one thing that we've done. Our members also talked a lot about, you know, how do we get to the decision makers early? And when I say decision makers in this case, I mean parents and students and teachers, and really helping them understand that the manufacturing job of today is not the manufacturing job of 5 years ago. And why do you want to be interested in these different careers, and what's the education path that will take to move you down into that career? So our members in this past December pledged 30,000 internships, externships, and apprenticeships to be available for students and teachers to participate, so that we are getting that information to them early, so that students have that hands-on work experience, so that educators can come to our businesses and learn about the different processes that we have, the different jobs we have available, the skill sets that we're looking for when these students graduate. So those are some examples of public-private partnerships that we have developed to help them move that needle on education attainment, and they're not legislative in nature. So not all of these initiatives that we look at are legislative in nature. Our next one is governance. You can see one of the great things I like to point out is that we rank third as far as the best run state. If you guys all read the paper, which I'm sure you do, you hear about our economy and some of the budget issues that we've had within the state. And I would tell you that the fact that we still remain high as far as one of the best run states will tell you that our lawmakers and our leadership in this state are doing a good job of addressing those budget issues and still keeping us at the top. But where we rank low is in our state business tax climate. We rank 40th as far as our state business tax climate. For those of you who have been involved in economic development for years, this is not news to you, right? So when site selectors are looking at our state, they see that our rates are higher, and especially because we have federal deductibility that's with part of that, and then they discard Iowa off their list. And so we've been advocating for the past year and a half for tax reform, not only for businesses, but for individuals as well. Because we also, again, want this to be a competitive state for people to come and live and raise their families. And so legislation did pass this last legislative session on tax reform. So hopefully there's some triggers in place for that. So once they meet those triggers, hopefully our state will become more competitive. But that's a great example of where we took a look at that metric and what's the policy initiative that we think we should move forward in order to improve that metric. And then we have health and wellness. And you know, that first one that you take a look at where we're ranking poor is active primary care physicians per 100,000. Again, you see the theme among all these metrics: workforce, workforce, workforce. Where do we find the people? But there's positive of the number of people lacking health insurance in Iowa. So a lot of people within Iowa do have access to good health care. And then demographics and diversity. Again, this one probably won't surprise you at all either, that we rank poorly in that area. I will tell you, of all the states in the United States, Iowa is the only state that did not increase their population 50% between 1900 and 2010. We're the only state. So again, back to the theme that we've been talking about, in order to address our workforce issues, we need to improve our population and diversity within the state. This is an issue that a lot of people talk about, but nobody sits down and really takes a look at, you know, what policies should we be putting together and moving forward in our state to increase this. So one of our recommendations, again, is we look at the Business Council as a catalyst for these conversations. We're looking at how do we bring together this public and private group to really start having these conversations on what are going to be those policies that increase our population diversity. I will tell you another thing that our members have talked about as well is how do we promote the job opportunities that are here too, because we feel in Iowa there are great job and career opportunities, and that will help attract people to our state. So how do we do a better job of that as the Business Council and in partnering with other organizations like the Department of Economic Development? And so that just gives you a kind of a look at what are some of the other little factors that lead into those high-level factors that we have. So, as I mentioned, that is really more of that national data that we have that helps drive our policies. But why we're here today is we want to hear from you about what are some of your local challenges that you have for economic growth, but also what are some of the great things that you're doing that we can then share around the state that people can see as best practices. And you are doing a lot of good stuff here in Muscatine, and I've heard that around the state, not from my members, but from other people that I interact with. So we're excited to highlight some of the great things that you're doing today with our panel, but then again, opening it up to you after our panel just to hear about, you know, what are those factors that we should be considering when we're putting together our policy. Now, ironically, tomorrow, our members are meeting, and they're starting to talk about the policies that they will be moving forward. So we'll have a great opportunity to take the feedback that we received today and share that with our members when we get together tomorrow. So with that, I am going to call up our panel. We've got Greg Jenkins, who's the president and CEO of the Muscatine Chamber. We have Rich Dwyer from Kent Corporation. We have Jerry Reeby, who is the superintendent of Muscatine Schools, and Gary Carlson, who wears many hats in this community, is a state legislator, but then also working for H&I. That's all the introduction we get.
If I could start. Kevin, can you hear me okay back there? Okay, good. So when we talked about how we need to concentrate or what efforts we might put in place to attract businesses in the community, and one of the things that comes to mind is that this community has careers available. There are jobs for people in this community that can lead them to raise their families here for the long haul, that they can grow within their business, whether they start on the shop floor and grow from there. But there are jobs available for people to grow through and to have a career in this community. And we need to make sure that we're telling that story so people recognize that this is a place. I mean, I think it's a great town to raise a family, and no doubt about that. You know, when you think about what this community's done over the last 5 or 7 years and the capital investment in the community, it's upwards of $500 million that businesses have spent in this town to grow the community. Well, one of the things I lose a little sleep over is if we don't sort out how to attract those skills that we need for the future, will we see that trend continue? I'd like to think we will, but I think that's cause for us to have this conversation about what we're going to do for our workforce moving forward into the future. Another piece for me that I find interesting is the number of people that commute into Muscatine to go to work every day. We have over 10,000 people, per the studies of the Iowa Workforce Development, that commute into Muscatine to go to work every day. It's about 10,800 for the county. There's about 8,000 people who live here and work here, And on top of that, there's about 5,000 who live here and work someplace else. And we'd love to move that needle even just a little bit. I get that people want to live, work close to their families, and so that commuting, I understand that they might want to do that. But we need to sort out how we can attract those people to come and stay here and have a long-term career in our community.
So that really leads us to one of the other bullet points up there is regarding housing. And housing study was commissioned. Many of you are very familiar with it. The housing study showed a number of shortfalls in Muscatine housing. One of them was affordable housing. Some of you are very close to the affordable housing issue today. And we have a lot of initiatives undergoing to address affordable housing. Lots more to do. But it's not just about affordable housing. It's also about workforce housing and middle income housing. We need to be able to attract people. As Greg mentioned, we have thousands of people who are choosing to live in, or choosing to work in our community, but are not choosing to live in our community. And housing is one of those reasons. So when we don't have adequate housing, we really get, we get artificially high rents, or we get people to make a decision to work, but to commute. And when they commute, we really lose them. We lose the fabric of the community that they would bring by living here, by volunteering here, by owning property here, paying property taxes here, all the things that would drive it. And later, as we talk about education, for those with families, about having children enrolled in our schools. So, as we look at this market, Iowa City and the Quad Cities are reaping the benefits of the careers and job opportunities that we have in Muscatine. So a significant initiative is to continue to focus to work with developers and builders to dramatically increase the amount of housing constructed in Muscatine. And when I think about middle income workforce housing, we're talking a development that maybe start out that's 1,500 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 225 to 250,000. As we've done our analysis work, that is a critical component of being add to this community. You know, I moved here a long time ago, and so I'm as old as I look. But when I first came to town, areas like Sunrise and Sunset were housing development areas, and later on we've had others. You know, Mulberry Manor or Mark Twain or whatever. But you know what? It's been a lot of years since we had big developments, and we need big developments again to get big changes in Muscatine, to find those people who are attracted for their career to make Muscatine their home. Because the other transition is when you're here and this is your career, but then you also live here, it's when the community becomes not the community in which I work, but the community in which I work and live, which becomes my hometown. And that's one of the big driving initiatives that we need to, that's one of the things that's holding us back from attraction, and we need to continue to put all forces ahead on housing. Now, the City Council has recently talked about a possibility of a TIF for a housing development. And the City Council, you know, I'm proud to say they did that unanimously. Now, they haven't voted on it yet. There's still more work to be done. There's still financing to be done. But the fact is that we have people in the community to begin to look at this, to recognize what a need this is. We need to really support not only those developers, but we need to support the council. We need to support the city staff. We need to support that group so that takes place and begins to address one of the big attraction issues that is stopping us from getting the growth we need. Which also leads us into a little bit the population, which is another issue that we have up there. And you'll see many of the things that are constraints to Muscatine mirror constraints that we have in the state of Iowa. Georgia mentioned that Iowa is the only state in the United States that hasn't doubled its population over that time period. I mean, we've been 3 million people forever, right? But what is changing in Iowa is where do those 3 million people live? We have now crossed that threshold where more than 50% of Iowans live in 10 counties. Well, you know those counties when you sit back and think. You know, it's kind of that Iowa City, Cedar Rapids corridor. It's the Des Moines, Ames corridor. There's a little bit in Council Bluffs. There's a little bit in Sioux City. There's a little bit in Dubuque.
There's a little bit in the Quad Cities. We're up like 200 people, okay? But the demographics have changed so dramatically that the counties and the cities that are able to attract people are also going to be the winners in this fight for talent. As Greg mentioned, we've got great companies, we've got great jobs. We won't continue to have that if we don't have talent for them. Well, we're talking about housing, and you know what? The best saying I heard not too long ago is, housing is where jobs sleep at night, okay? And it's what we need, both of those, to be able to break that population issue for us is housing to match up with the careers that we have, and also working to make Muscatine more attractive for other people to leave, by God, leave across from the river and come here as a solvent state to call your home, and bring them here and have the places for them to choose to live. But it's more than housing, and it's more than schools, and it's more than careers. There are other things that hold us back, and that drives us to some of the community amenities, what the other things that draw people to our town.
So, when you look at Muscatine, I had somebody visit me who hadn't been here for about 7 years, about a couple of weeks ago. He was absolutely fascinated about the improvements of our town, and it has gotten better all the time. You think about how this community is able to pull together, and I go back to the CAT grant that was obtained last fall, how the community came together to make that happen, to make the trails, the dog park, have a beautiful library come to life. And those sort of things are important to this community, and we need to continue doing that. Upscale the riverfront, that may be one of the next projects we undertake. There's work to be done. But those things are all part of what makes Muscatine a great place to live and work. And they're also ways that we need to market ourselves so people recognize that, so they understand that this town does have those features, those benefits, and it is a great town for people to live in.
Well, and the one thing I was going to mention too, when you talk about housing, that we've heard from our members is there aren't even housing for interns. So when we're expanding our opportunities to have interns, there's not local housing for interns as well. And I know Senator Loughran's in the room, and he has been working on this issue too. So, I mean, this is one that seems to be bubbling to the top in a lot of the meetings that we've been having.
Yeah, there's one company that rents all the dorms from MCC, don't we, Naomi, for our interns, but we don't really want to share that with anybody else. Okay, so I have a partisan hat when I think about H&I as well, right?
You know, one of the things through the Future Ready Iowa Initiative, and Jerry, you sat on that commission, and what they've talked about in their 5th recommendation is really having some of these community conversations to where you bring forward business and nonprofits, and then you also bring forward education and those within the community who can really come together and start having those conversations about what the needs are within the community. And Rich, who is a deputy at the Business Council and sits on our Career Ready Workforce Deputy Committees, has talked a lot about what you guys are doing here in Muscatine through Align Impact Muscatine. So maybe, Rich, if you want to talk a little bit about that and how it aligns with Future Ready Iowa as well.
Sure. Align Impact Muscatine, some of you have heard about it. It's basically a group getting together to take advantage of the collective impact model that's out here. That's you can go classes for, you can learn about and how to make this happen. But it's trying to pull different entities together. So you're pulling businesses along with municipalities, along with educational facilities. You're bringing in all the nonprofits, different ones, trying to work together. And how can we be working together for the better of the community and make a major impact across the board? So that's where Align Impact was all about and came together about 3 years ago. Tim Warren sits in the back that heads that up as a director and does a phenomenal job with pulling this group together. One of the first things that was done is go out and do an asset map of what's out there in the market in our community today of all these different nonprofits, all organizations. What is it that they do? And how do we pull those together and make a bigger impact? So the Align Impact Muscatine is really focused on education, being a #1 driver that could really help in a number of avenues. Back in 2014, there was a needs assessment that was completed. And one of the biggest things is how do we help into poverty? How do we help with education? How do we help with mental health? Those were some of the top items that were identified in this community. So from this group, we put together ideas to come together, And from that, we came up with basically four groups or directives that we're after. One is working with early education, child education, from that basically birth to about 5 years of age. What can we do in that realm? An example of some of the things that was done, Imagination Library. If you haven't heard about that, be sure and pick up on that, where every child in Muscatine, they sign up, gets a free book every year up to their 5 years of age. Free book comes to their doorstep. Comes in the mail, parents get to read with them when they're young, all the way through. A great opportunity to help with that early education. The next step is looking at education success, academic success. What can we do to help those in elementary classes, middle school, and high school? How do we help them take it to that next step? There's our future workforce, so we want to make sure they're ready for the workforce as well. So we want to make sure they're successful. One of the items working in that category is how do we help prevent chronic absenteeism? Go back in the year 15-16 school year, there's about 18% of the students were chronic absentee, which is basically 10% of the time that they're supposed to be in school, they're gone. Think about that. You got that many days you're missing out as a student. That's more than 10%. How's that going to help you long term? That life skill of coming to work and showing up every single day. In some cases, those that may not that gone through those problems, they're self-selecting themselves out of a job because they don't show up. So we have to have those things in place. The third item that the group is working towards is basically post-secondary education. And when we talk about that, it's not just college degrees, it's certificates, it's any of the post-secondaries that we can get, junior college, whatever it might be, to help fit into the jobs in our marketplace. We have roles for all of the different types. From hourly rates all the way up to executive levels, we have different roles for everybody that we want to try to bring them in and make sure they have the education to help us long term. And then the fourth one is looking at adult education. How do we continue to help the adults get better educated, but also those that are less fortunate? How do we give them the education where they can find that full-time job? One of the examples in that scenario was looking with the MCC, working with the homeless shelter, to where they ended up, identified about 5 individuals from the homeless shelter that went to a welding class and took about 5 weeks welding class, came out with a certificate, and Naomi, I believe, all 5 of them are gainfully employed, or 4 out of the 4 might. To the point where the second cohorts are going through the process right now. But a great way that we work together, trying to find these avenues of what we can do more within the community. So we can look at those life skills that we need throughout the community to help those students, so where they can come back and stay in Muscatine, ideally, and have the jobs, and the jobs are here, but we need those workforce to be developed further along. So a lot of that is bringing all those community members together and really making an impact. And that's hence the collective impact model, to where we can make, at least move the needles in a bigger way here in Muscatine.
Well, following Greg and Gary and Rich is a little bit humbling. So one of the things that I guess I would like to first say right from the get-go is I am very proud of the Muscatine Community School System. I'm very proud of the people that we have working there, and I have great hope for the students that attend there. Now, saying that, we still have a lot of work to do. But about 18 to 24 months ago, we did some strategic work to take a look at if we're going to have every student be a success story, every student be able to walk out of our school, our high school, and be able to do what they want to do either in a 2-year school, a 4-year school, or to work, we were going to have to do some work to make our program better. And we said, you know, that starts with making sure we have rigorous academics. It makes sure that we're focusing on career pathways. And we have to make sure that we are providing an opportunity to develop kids and to become effective community leaders. And so we have kind of looked at 3 different areas of preparation for our kids. First is for those kids that are looking at a traditional post-secondary experience, either a 2-year college or a 4-year college. We said we need to really improve the rigor of our program because our kids were not leaving the school with enough preparation to be as successful in those programs as they need to be. We are in the top 10 high schools in the state of Iowa for AP offerings. and for the number of AP tests taken. 5 years ago, we had about 125 seats in AP courses. We have over 500 today. The district pays for the AP test. They're required part of the course. We are removing barriers for kids that may not be able to afford that AP test, and we're recognizing that experience in the AP course, if you're going to a 2-year school or 4-year school, is going to be extremely helpful. We are one of the few high schools in the state of Iowa that has universal ACT testing. Every junior is tested with the ACT. The district pays for that cost. So that, again, removes a barrier for students that may be looking for post-secondary opportunities. We are the only public district in the state of Iowa that's offering pre-AP curriculum in grades 5 through 8. And one of the things that makes me particularly proud is we have a school with 80% free and reduced price lunch. And when we talked about this, people said, well, that building will never have any pre-AP kids. We have 29 in Franklin Elementary that are in pre-AP math. So we are removing barriers for kids and helping move those things along. We also have a great partnership with Muscatine Community College, and we would not be able to do the things we do without that partnership. We have a wide array of concurrent courses that we offer with MCC. This is a great opportunity for kids if they're going to a 4-year school or 2-year school or into some other training. We've also, with the help of AIM, have really made an effort to make sure that our students or seniors complete their FAFSA, which is the Free Financial Aid Form, Federal Financial Aid Form. Without that, the odds of getting into a school probably are slim for many. And we've had in the past about half of our kids complete that. And this year we're hopefully will be in the 80% range of people that complete that, because that is that stepping stone. So that is one area we've really worked on. The other is, and this is the one that I would really ask for the business community's help with, accelerated workforce training, which is in the academy model with MCC. And I again really take my hat off to MCC and the community college system in working with us to find ways to give kids an opportunity to get a head start on post-secondary training. And we currently have an engineering manufacturing academy. We have a culinary arts academy. We have a new welding academy. There's some others on the horizon that we hope to get going. But what we need are more kids in those. We have a community that has kids that this would really benefit, and we need to find ways to encourage kids and their parents to see that this is a great pathway into middle-class life. And so for kids that are coming from some challenges in their homes, this is a great way to get a start up on post-secondary education with the district paying the cost. If they complete that, there's additional financial aid for them as they would continue at MCC, and we just need to get more kids involved with that. And the last area is life skills. We really need to make sure that kids are complete folks. And we have a wide range of activities that kids participate in, from music, fine arts, athletics, and all of those things have one thing in common. They're places that kids have to learn that their individual skills have to get better in concert with other people in order to achieve their goal. And isn't that what we all want in the workplace? So we have that, and we've also have added counselors, both for mental and emotional support, but also for career and vocational guidance at our levels. So we are working hard. I'm not going to say we've cracked the code, but I'm going to tell you we have not sat by and said, well, gosh, I wish we could be better. We're working really hard to get better each and every day. And the work that we're able to do with the various components in our community is really important. And I would agree with Greg, this is a great community. And I would not be afraid to tell any of my friends, any of my family, if you want to come to a great community to live, you should check out Muscatine. We have a great school system. We have a lot of amenities in this community, and it's a great place to live. And so we really have some good things going here, and we just need to get that message out, because it's too much of a well-kept secret. You know, part of this rests with educating parents. For a lot of parents that maybe haven't had experiences outside their current workplace, they sometimes just don't know what opportunities are available for kids. And there was a great comment, George, and I think you made about the manufacturing job of 5 years ago isn't like it is today. The manufacturing job of 5 years from now may not be the same. And so we need to make sure that parents understand there is a great opportunity for this if your student is a learner, is capable, and shows up. Attendance is critical. That quote about, a big part of life is showing up is true. You can't participate, and we are pushing, you're there on time, you're there all day, you're there every day. And if that happens, good things are going to happen. So I think we need to really be looking at, in the community, the various businesses that connect back to the academies. How can we do a good job of not only providing internships, but also just providing some understanding of what that business, the career ladders in that business, how this fits into from entry level to a progression in that area, and they don't see this as a dead end, and it's not. It's the entryway into a middle class life, and that's what we really want for all of our kids, is to have that experience. We do, and we need more. This is one of the things that we've been having some conversation with. How do we get more kids into internships? How do we get more kids to explore that there's an array of pathways to success? It doesn't all lead through the University of Iowa. It doesn't all lead through MCC. It doesn't all lead through getting a job out of high school. There's a lot of different paths that you need to take. But we really need to get parents on board with this, because we have far too many parents that tell their kids it's okay not to finish school. It's okay not to do something after school. We need every student. The stats you were giving about the workforce, it's scary. And as I approach Social Security age, I want all these people to be employed. I want them to be employed with good jobs. And I want them, so we really do need to make sure that there is no wasted souls out there. And today's workforce, tomorrow's workforce, is really going to demand that it's a different kind of worker, and we really need to help parents see that what they have, their kids can have so much more than what they've had.
I think another issue on the academies, so often you hear about student debt and high student debt and the cost of getting additional training and education. And one of the beautiful things that we have, both in the academies and as also in the dual enrollment, is that the system, the school system, the state system of funding education is paying for that. So in the academies, when they finish that senior year in high school, where they're really being co-trained by both the high school and the community college, they've really finished that first year of a 2-year program, and they've had no out-of-pocket cost. And Naomi has worked with her foundation and others to allow to have scholarships for those students who then have finished the academy. If they want to go on and continue their education, they can help offset that cost as well. It's not free that second year, but it can be dramatically offset. Well, somebody not only have an electronics certification, but then with one additional year, having a 2-year degree, an engineering technician degree, really dramatically improves their skill set levels and their opportunity for that kind of growth. So what we should have in a class of 350 seniors, we ought to have people knocking down the doors to get into our academies, and yet today we're still begging to get a few people into the academies. And it is one of the most perplexing things that we haven't cracked the code on that, and maybe some of you today will also have some ideas about how we can crack the code to get these academies to even be much stronger. We have this working. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
I also think it takes businesses being creative too. To your point, Jerry, like I think about Ben, who's in the audience. I mean, they just put together a pre-apprenticeship program for high school students at Ruan in the IT area, which is something they hadn't done before. But getting employers out and having them see, meeting with school districts and the different opportunities, which is one of the providing those opportunities too. It's having both education and business think more creatively about.
Well, and I think too, we need to really look at how we can best use our community resources. We have, and welding is a great example. We offer a lot of welding opportunities in the high school, and yet what is the one area that so many people are talking about a shortage in is welders. Somehow we need to be able to get to where the high schools may be providing that entry-level experience, and that MCC becomes that next level, so hopefully then they would see that as the career. So I think there's a lot of things we just need to look at differently. We need to restructure. We can't do the same thing and expect a different result. We're going to have to look at how can we place these things in front of kids differently.
They looked at, what are some of our careers that are really in demand within the community, and welding was one of them. And so they have now also together a great career apprenticeship program that can be replicated around the state to address some of those needs. So, just being creative, then we can share that.
You're absolutely correct, George, as far as being creative. One of the things that we keep looking at on the network side, and actually started a pilot on this year, is to take some of our interns that we bring in the summertime and retain them as employees throughout the school year. So they go back to classes, and we actually open up an office at the campus of Iowa State to where they can work out of that office while they're going to school. So now they're earning some additional funding that's going to help them pay their college way through, but also we have an employee that's learning more about our business with the idea that we want to try to bring them back once they're completed. So it is all about working together and having creative ideas, but it's also more so than just the teachers and the parents. It's a community event. All of this takes all of us to do this with these students. We all have to be a part of how we can help them move along in their school career. What's some of the things that we can do? We talked about chronic absenteeism, but what if, and I'm just throwing this out for businesses here to think about today, but what if you offer incentives for parents to bring their attendance records back to the business, and you offer up some kind of a discounted card for them, or go out to dinner or something along that for those parents, and take their kids out for perfect attendance. But what can we do to be creative on getting these kids to stay in school all day long, all the time, or what else can we do to help tie that into business long term? So I think there's a lot of different creativity we can pull out.
So I think, it's important, what you've heard today is it really takes a community effort to really address the workforce issues that we have and a lot of the other issues that we have. But then also, the state does have an opportunity to provide assistance and different programming. So from your perspective, what are some of the things that the state could be doing to help with these barriers?
I think we all know who we're handing this to.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Well, certainly the initiative that was passed, almost unanimously by the legislature was the Future Ready Iowa Workforce, because it's a recognition that a high school diploma today is not enough skills to carry somebody forward. They need to have additional training, whether it's additional technical training or whether it's different academic training, and it's certainly regarding lifelong learning. And so the legislation's been put in place. There's still some challenges with all the funding to be put in place to be able to do that. But and those are areas that the state needs to continue to look at. But the idea of this concept of apprenticeships and getting students more exposure earlier in life to work, to begin to understand careers, to begin to understand what they enjoy to do, in which they will be rewarded to do. The Gallup poll, we had at the Iowa Business Council brought in the Gallup organization who'd done some study on that, and finding the difference in the success level of students that had internships and their success at getting a high-paying job after their graduation was remarkably different between those students who had taken internships and those students who had not. And also, from the business standpoint, the amount of students that not only took the jobs but stayed on the job and were the kinds of people that you wanted to hire and keep and continue to develop, increased dramatically if students had 2 internships or more, or an internship that extended 6 months or longer. So the state needs to continue to work through policies, procedures that can enable companies to be able to do things to get our children that opportunity, and to even to get our older children or late learners' children or people who are trying to upskill. You know, the program that Naomi has worked so well with Scott and Charlotte when she was at MCSA about welding. Now, what can help a homeless person almost more than anything else? A great job, right? They need other things as well, but getting those skills and being able to get that confidence and being able to get a job where they're getting higher wages and getting the opportunity to have benefit package, how are we going to break that cycle? That's one of the perfect ways to do it. And that's what a lot of this is about breaking cycles. And so the chronic absenteeism, because I sit on the AIM board as well, and when I started to learn about children in 2nd grade and 3rd grade that have an absenteeism of 10% or more, it's almost shocking to think about how far they're falling behind in their academics, and it is no wonder that some of them start to struggle as they go forward. And 10% absenteeism, for those of you who are employers, and I see Bob Jensen back there, all the years we worked together, 10% unemployment, man, they self-selected out a long time before they hit 10%, or absenteeism, right? So that need to get students there every day translates into needing to be at work every day.
I think one of the things that the state did that was just vital was the workforce readiness work to bring this to the public's attention that we are going to be approaching a crisis if we don't come up with a solution to this. And I think the other thing that whatever the state can do to eliminate the barrier between K-12 and post-secondary is going to be really valuable. And if I ever become king, and you can all rest assured that's not going to happen, but we really need to have a PK-14 approach to things, because what we do is we've somewhat created an artificial barrier between 12 and 13. And if we could have a much more of a seamless transition, I think it would really help from a career standpoint and from an academic standpoint. So I hope we can continue to look for ways that we can that can be institutionalized, because, like I said, we have a great partner with MCC. But the more ways that we can make that seamless, the better for our community and our kids. One of the things that we've looked at when we look at post-secondary things is that summer drop-off. In May, you've got all kinds of kids that are going to go on to school, and in August, they're not. And so if we could make that more seamless, that there isn't necessarily an end at 12, but just a continuation, I think could be of value. And I think we're getting closer to the things that we do with community colleges, but we still have, it's two separate institutions, and kids have to work their way through both. That sounded kind of revolutionary, and I didn't mean it to sound quite that way. So.
One little fact, and then we want to open it up and hear from you and get your thoughts, either questions of the panel or things that you think are barriers or good things that you think that you're doing that we should share with others in the state. But another initiative that was passed, as Gary mentioned, through the Future Ready Iowa initiative, is the Employer Innovation Fund. So the enabling language was passed, so there's language in the code that creates this fund, and then the legislature would have to fund it next year. And so what this fund would do is support some of the efforts like Aligned Impact Muscatine is doing. So where communities have come together, they've put together these groups, they've identified what some of those barriers are for workforce, and then let's say businesses and the chamber and others put money into a pool of money, and then it can be matched at the state level to help break those barriers down. So let's say you've looked at your workforce and you've identified that transportation really is an issue, and that's why we're not getting people to the jobs. And so these dollars can be used for transportation, or it can be used to create those scholarships that go into jobs and demand within that community, or it could even be used for daycare. Let's say you don't have affordable daycare for people, and that's keeping them from either skilling up and moving into different jobs within businesses or just going into the workforce in general. So that's another opportunity that I think the state, if they were to fund that next year, will help communities really at the local level, grassroots, in the work that they're doing. So with that, we'd like to go ahead and open it up to you guys to hear what comments you have. And I don't know if you've noticed, but we're having microphone issues up here. So we don't necessarily have a microphone to pass back. So what I'll ask you to do is just stand up and call out your question or comment to us, and then I'll repeat it in the event that people have not been able to hear it. So who's going to be the brave person to start? Senator.
Yeah, a little bit of a battle at marketing with the Future AI program this morning. And they said, well, why would we need to market that, let people know about it? But what Jerry had mentioned, people don't know the programs. I think probably at the high school level and also around the state, we need to make sure people know about the programs. I'm on the Economic Development Authority, and one guy sits next to me from BMAX said that he says we have plenty of skill training. We just don't have the people, so we need to get the word out on that.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I think getting the word out is a huge issue in a lot of areas. I think Iowa isn't well promoted. I was reluctant to move to Iowa. I'm thrilled now that I left Illinois. When I was 22, I was reluctant. I didn't know much about the state. Muscatine as well. It's difficult to know how to market these days. There's so many messages from multiple sources coming at people that I think that's an issue we could certainly address. People, we're a well-kept secret. You've heard that over and over and over. We need to figure out how to get that secret out in the public. Personally, I think we're asking too much of our school systems. They're feeding our kids, they're watching them after school, they're providing mental health counselors. It's a burden on a school system that's supposed to be educating. And I understand that those are issues involved in how a student responds and their attendance issues, all of those things. But I think we need to look for other sources of support for our schools so they can really focus on education and keeping kids in school. I think an excellent example is we've got a great culinary area right here. You can see it from the windows here. Great facility for it. But when that marketing went out, it missed all the people, pretty much, who would have been interested. They live in apartments. They're not on a mailing list. I had several of my tenants that were totally unaware and would have been great in that program. So that's another part of that whole marketing. How do you get the word out? And lastly, with some of the tenant applications that we receive in our rental business, I'm astonished at the number of young people in this community who are on Social Security disability in their 20s. I don't know what's driving that. I don't know if it seems to me like there's got to be some fraud involved somewhere. I hope we don't have that many disabled young people. But that, and they're not working, obviously. And they also have a $700 a month income and want a $1,000 a month apartment. They missed math class. Oh my goodness. Anyway, just some of my observations and comments.
I'm Bob James. Gary mentioned my name earlier. Indicated we've been around for a while. First off, Muscatine is a great place to raise your family and educate. We've been here since 1972, and it's a great community, and I remember my days at Band Aid, recruiting people from the East Coast, West Coast, and all over. And it was a challenge, but I could sell Muscatine, because I just got proud to be in Muscatine. I've been in the staffing business 13 years with Band Aid, and now 32 with Temp Associates RJK. And back to Gary's comment in terms of kids that absentee in 10 to 15% when they're down in second and third grade. Unfortunately, that starts at home, and if the parents don't give them the guidance and recommend and require them to go to school, unfortunately, they probably already have that as a part of their well-being of not going to work. And we see that daily, unfortunately. Unfortunately, we place lots of people on really good jobs in Muscatine, and then they don't go to work. So the employer and the customer doesn't have any choice but to go ahead and terminate them. So I don't have the answer. I don't have the answer, unfortunately. If I could, I could be a hero, but I don't have an answer. So, but somehow we've got to educate parents on the importance of, making sure the child goes to school. So that to me is really where it starts, is right there.
Yep.
I worked for many years in the housing program. My ex-boss is here even today, so she can help out perhaps a little bit of this at another point in time. But my question actually is partially from what Gary, you were talking about cracking the code. And that's because I worked with low-income housing, and I worked with family self-sufficiency program. And so I worked with the college, and when he's talking about the welding programs and things like that and how many people to get there. Okay, the programs are there, and they know they need it, and how do you get the folks there? On cracking the code, I really believe that you have to get those kids that are those questionable things about how they're getting to school and on time, and those parents, that level, not as in the teachers, the administrators, and things like that. You need the folks that are having that trouble trying to get there and find out from them what are their particular barriers, and then from there you can build it from that kind of a ground up, perhaps, rather than from trying to think how come we can't understand why that parent is not paying attention because that kid hasn't been in school or whatever. There's some kind of barriers that are stopping that. So how can we get those from the ground up? Thoughts?
So I've heard a lot about parents in the comments that we've had here. Who do you feel are your best connectors with parents? Who are the influencers of parents in your communities?
Their peers. Do they hang around with their friends? Just like anybody.
Some might be the employers, so some of us need to be more involved possibly. How do we get involved, whether it's a small business, large business, whatever it might be. You're right, who is the influencers? Because we all have to work at it, trying to uncover what's going to motivate them.
And some of it are churches. Some of the churches have very good youth programs and are connectors with the children too. And it may be even a closer partnership with some of them as far as getting out some of the information and some of the things about careers and some of the things about training opportunities, because they have a different connection than just the school system has with them or just the employer has with them. So, trying to embark upon how we partner even more with some of that group, I think, is another alternative.
Just barriers that we should be thinking about when we're putting together our policies, or some great things that you've done, like this hotel that we're staying in today, where you found a gap within your community and got people together to build it. Any other feedback? Now's your time. Yeah.
One of the things you talked about was internships, and we have a junior in college. Anybody's got a job for him? We get a resume to you. But that brings up the point of how do these kids find the jobs? If they don't have a contact within the company, is there like a clearinghouse that the maybe the Chamber of Commerce could have that has lists all the internships, you know, that are available in Muscatine, and sort of like the your scholarship application, Jerry. You send in one resume and it goes out for X number of jobs, kind of thing, something like that.
I think that's a great point, and that's something that came up during the Future Ready Iowa process, as well as how could we create that clearinghouse, and even like within our member companies have talked about it, because they only have so many internship positions available but get great applications. So how can we share that also among our member companies? I can tell you at the state level they're putting together a work-based learning portal. And so what this portal is to help facilitate is clearly more work-based learning. So it's education, school districts can go on, sign up and say, we have some interest in for business partnering with us to provide more hands-on training for our students, and then businesses who don't necessarily know how to connect, so maybe some of your smaller businesses that would like to have those opportunities but don't know what they should be doing and how to work with the school district can then show an interest online. And then the other thing that they've talked about within that portal is having a repository for all the different internships statewide that are available, so that students can go on to there and find out what those different opportunities are as well. So that's a great point. I would also tell you the Future Ready Iowa website has different jobs that are available, and they've also talked about potentially putting internships on there as well. But definitely something that I think people recognize is needed.
There's been discussion as well as far as looking at externships. If you're familiar with the term, but it's basically having teachers come into businesses and work during the summer while they're off classes. So get them exposed to what is it that businesses do. And for the most part, it just gradually get started across the state. Even in Muscatine, it's been a slow start to it. But it's both issues. One is you got teachers that kind of like their summers off, and it's tough to go find something that they're going to work at. And the other side of business, you have to physically look at what's that job going to be for them, so they do have it as a learning case, so they can learn from it and know what
the outcome's going to be, so they can take it to the classrooms, and then they know what they should be teaching. If it's science-based, whatever it might be, that they're in the science field. So that's another avenue as businesses that we ought to take a look at on a regular basis, along with the teacher side.
Well, I mean, it was like an absolutely foreign world. You come up through the education system, and then you enter the education system. So you've kind of been in a bubble your entire life. And then you step into the business world, and my goodness, the first thing I realized was my life was no longer regulated by bells. Every hour there was a bell going off in my life, for 25 years. But I think that is an excellent idea. I think it would go a long way toward helping the teachers.
That, for teachers, they also are trying to get some of their education credits during the summer. So is there a way that we can look at potentially taking these externships and having that apply toward their credit so that they're more willing to come and participate within the externship? So as we think about what are some of the barriers to people participating in some of these activities, that's what we're taking a look at, and then how do we move that forward?
It's something as simple as having an externship count towards certification, recertification credits.
Yep.
Would be a real plus for some folks and get them out there. Like a long time ago, I did an externship with Hertz Rent-A-Car, and I want you to know I never look at a rent-a-car the same. I don't know how many I cleaned that summer, but it does give you a different perspective on different things that you wouldn't necessarily have done.
There's not a lot of virgin territory in order to build a subdivision, which means you're kind of forced to tear down
existing housing, which is usually the low-income stuff. When you reduce the supply, it doesn't really help affordability very much. So what kind of actions are being done by the city to expand the geography of the city, maybe get some good virgin farmland that's not being fully utilized? Just a question, how do you expand the city so you can have room for housing?
Jim? It was.
Oh, great. Well, we do have some plots of land that are available, and we want to focus on those. But certainly, voluntary annexation has probably been the one that we have used the most in Muscatine. Where I think that we need to start thinking differently in our community and across the state is how development takes place. Because generally, a developer, even if you have property in the city or outside the city, that the tremendous investment that you have to put into it to grade it, to get in utilities, to get in services, whatever, so that you can do the building is a huge impediment to be able to get housing built. But cities don't need to have the same return on investment that maybe a business needs to have, because when you think about the lifetime of a house, and so being creative of how we think about public policy to spur development, whether it's streets, whether it's more that we do to get sewer to them and water to them, so that the risk profile on the development is different. That also means that if the cities begin to think more that way, some of the economic tools that we've used, like TIFs and some of those things, may no longer be necessary, because a lot of that economic development tool has been used to offset some of that cost. But to get building means that you need to have the right zoning and you need to have the right infrastructure in place so that the builders can come in and provide it. Even in the low-income housing, we've seen, that is a huge reason for the affordable housing, is the need to have some pretty substantial TIFs that the city has approved to be able to overcome that investment burden to be able to meet the needs of that population. But I don't think that what we have recognized for affordable housing, and have used state programs and federal programs to do, there aren't state and federal programs for middle income housing, workforce housing. The state has a workforce housing program, and it's oversubscribed. The dollars that we put available in it are already subscribed out to 2022. I know in talking to Debbie Durham, who's the director of Iowa's Economic Development Program, is looking at putting more dollars into that program because it is such an unmet need. And specifically aiming more of the money to those communities that are really those communities outside of the 10 counties that have 50% of the population, all right? Because the other needs that we have in our state is not just to make those 10 counties even bigger, but it's also to keep alive the other counties and getting more reasons for people to build housing in those areas. So I see those as a couple of policy initiatives and budgeting initiatives as well. But Jim, it's a great point as to how do we continue to grow.
There's a real good article in the Des Moines Register on Sunday. It said that 58% of kids 14 to 24 had jobs, or had jobs back in '79, and now it's at 34%. So I'm kind of curious, because Gary taught life skills. Do we know numbers as far as students in high school have jobs?
That's a great question, and I've been thinking about this, because one of the things that I think really prepares you as we have those opportunities growing up to have those kind of jobs. It seems like we're seeing in a lot of those kind of positions, we're seeing adults that are having those positions. Partly, I think, because we have too many adults that are under-skilled, and that tends to be where they can be employed. And we certainly then have some kids that are working almost full-time and are a major wage earner for the family. But the number of kids that have the kind of part-time jobs that maybe we kind of had growing up, it's less.
There's some kids that maybe if they knew about the jobs, they be able to learn some skills.
Yeah, I agree. There's
there's nothing like having to be somewhere and having something other than your parent telling you need to do it is a good experience.
Line impact Muscatine, because you hit on it just a little bit for adult learners. You know, what are those barriers that you've seen for adult learners to be willing to skill up and maybe move into different positions?
Good question. Actually, when this first started out with AIM, and Tim could talk on this as well, but there was a survey that they did, actually went to focus groups as well, asking that class, asking those people, what are those barriers that you run up against? And it's across the board. Life happens. Those people have issues. They have problems that just happens to them. And there's all sorts that you can just make a list of it, but there's all sorts that goes on, but they have to deal with life. And part of it is trying to get over those tough calls. Some of it's transportation, some of it's legal issues that they're up against, some of it's drug issues, it's across the board, but you have to try to figure out how do you take them and see maybe more what the opportunities are out there, that there is ways to get through it. And we have to, again, work towards finding those ways for them. And we said it many times up here, but again, being creative, looking at not being afraid of trying different avenues to see if we can get those people down the right road. And obviously, it's been successful. We found some ways. It's happening. The welders that we talked about, it is going on, but probably not to the scale we need to see yet. And there's a lot more opportunities out there, but it's going to take all of us to try to get that done.
We talked about it, the more that we can get adult learners to be willing to skill up and move up positions, and that allows other opportunities to be open for younger students and those just graduating too.
And it's not just those that are having the problems, but those in the workforce too, that they can scale up and take on new roles, new responsibilities, and that opens up other jobs. So you have that constant promotional. And we worked on that quite extensive within Kent Corporation of how we help those employees skill up and go into the next role. We're always looking for the leadership developments. We've done a lot of in-house leadership developments for our employees, so we're constantly looking for that, and that leaves the next space open. So we need to fill those and trying to get people to step up. But we have to make sure that we look at it that we're not afraid to constantly learn every single day. And I think some people think they get through that school and they get through the time frame and it's on and they're done, they don't need to learn anything more. And that's a learning curve for all of us. You know, how many of us that's, you know, with the computer? You know, we all have to learn different things every single day because there's new applications, new apps out there that you're trying to learn that's going to help us be more efficient. Because heaven forbid, we're not on it enough already. It seems like it's constant. So we have to find ways that we're always learning to be more efficient.
That you guys have found in this community toward economic growth?
I think one of the things that the Business Council can do is perhaps focus on immigration. The number of people that are available to work in the state now, I think is, you said 2.6%. You're essentially down to an inventory of individuals that are largely unemployable. And you can focus a lot of attention on trying to get them to an employable state. But there are hundreds of thousands of people in Europe, in South America, in Africa, in Asia, that would love to come to this country, but we don't let them in. We have thousands of students who come to the United States for education, and then we send them back home because we won't let them stay. And I think those are ignorances on our part. I'm talking about the United States. We're passing up great people. The other thing on immigration is you cannot, in good conscience, paint everybody from south of the border as not being good citizens. They may not be legal yet, but we should find a way to make them legal. We should find a way to have them get to citizenship. And that would greatly increase the number of people that are available for our industries, for our businesses, large and small. We just have an unrealistic attitude about immigration, and I think that's something that we should focus on. We have empty schools. We have colleges all over the state of Iowa, most of them not in the top 10 counties, that are desperate for students. We could set up programs to educate, learn English, learn civics, learn citizenship in those small colleges. They're great educational places. And what we could do with housing, I mean, there's so many things that could be attractive to this state if we would push immigration. If we would push the legislature in the state and then push Congress to give us a chance to be a model for how to bring people into this country, how to get them educated, how to get them to citizenship, and how to get them employed.
And on to John's comments, there's 44,000 employed in Iowa. There's 62,000 postings right now, so we know it is a big crisis.
Yeah.
Amount of $225,000, I think it was, to build a home. I went to a meeting here earlier this year that they were talking about $150,000 was about the amount that somebody could take and afford a home if they were like on that welder salary. And so I know I understand on one aspect of it of building those middle class styled of homes so that we can have for folks, but at the same time, if you want that working class that can really need the places, we need to look at what that kind of development, and if those are anything with the TIF and all the other, incentives and things like that, could be important to make sure we keep those kind of folks around.
Yeah, that is the price. I mentioned that, $225,000, $250,000.
But that dollar amount you're talking about is household income, not necessarily individual income, right? So to be able to finance, $150,000 was $50,000 of household income, not necessarily individual income, and at $225,000, $250,000 house, in talking to some of the finance people, $65,000 household income would be able to most likely be able to finance that and still have a balanced scorecard as far as their budgeting standpoint. So we do think that it is very doable to be done. But as I mentioned in the housing study identified that there were housing needs in the affordable housing, but that also identifies that there's a big gap in workforce housing and middle income housing. And we need to pull on every lever we have. We can't just focus on one. And the fact that we have so many people working here but not choosing to live here means that those jobs exist and those incomes exist. But you go to western part of Iowa City and see the construction, or you see some of the construction that's taking place in the Quad Cities, and then we're watching the roads get filled up as the people are driving back and forth. And so finding some of that attractiveness, housing options in Muscatine, hopefully we'll be able to get them. The other issue is retail. We hear that all the time, the fact that the community doesn't have enough retail. But, retail as an industry is a pretty smart industry, okay? Retail follows population, okay? And they know that if you'll drive 30 miles to shop, they don't need to build where you are. But as you start to get more mass of people, retail will come. And so it becomes that, the cornerstones of a community is good education, good health care, attractive housing, and careers. Well, if you look at our community, we've got great companies with careers. As a community, we came together and we've continued to work on health care, and we've just had an expansion of our hospital. We're identifying housing as areas that we need to focus on. Our school systems is working and working hard, and the cooperation between the Muscatine School District and Community College, we're making progress in all those areas. We just have to keep doing it. And in the same issue, I bet if we would have sat in Boone, if we'd have all kind of gone over and listened to the same kind of meeting we're having tonight in Boone, there's probably not a whole lot of difference in the stories, right? Because the state suffers much of what we are suffering from. But you know what? I don't care about Boone as much as I care about Muscatine. And so, oh God, I hope there's nobody from Fairway here. Is there? But they won't be here till tomorrow, okay? Because they're members of the Iowa Business Council as well. But that, you know, it's finding our way to come to the solution. You know, in fact, when we got the last CAT grant from the state of Iowa, and we had to make a presentation to the CAT grant about this, and Greg and Rich and I were there, and the CAT grant board, many of you know because you've worked on these projects over here, they always are finding ways to say no. Okay, it's like, you know, they just don't want to give you that grant. And I remember when we made the presentation and we said, hey, we're going to raise this money and we want $500,000. And they said, well, you know, you need to raise money. I said, no, we got the money. We didn't really have the money. You know, I'm going to tell you, we played a little poker that day, but we were so confident that we could raise the money, we just said, give it to us today. Well, some of the people on the CAP board really didn't want to do that, did they? But there were some people who said, you know, the thing is, if Muscatine says they'll get it done, that's a community that will get it done. Well, guess what? We got it done, right? We got the $500,000 that day, and we came back and worked our tails off, right? All of us to raise the money, but we raised it, and many of you were a part of that. And we got it done. And that's what I think about with these problems that we have here, or these opportunities that we have here. If we pull together our collective wisdom on how we can solve these problems, there is nothing we can't solve. But it's all of us having the will to get it done. And I think that's where we need to move forward.
You know, one of the things that you know, the school system is probably limited in what it can do in some development things, but you know, our board has been very foresighted to look at when people come to look at where they'd like to live, they want to see good facilities. They want to see facilities that are current and up to date. You know, we're looking at a new science facility at the high school that we feel like can be one of the best in the state. We're looking, we have a new PE facility. We've upgraded our elementary buildings. I don't care what elementary building you go into Muscatine right now, you're going to see a building that has great furniture. I think we got those right here in Muscatine. They sell furniture in Muscatine. I don't know if you folks know that, but we've really put money into making sure that when people look at our school system, they see we're dynamic, we're here to stay, and this is a place for your kids should be at. So that, you know, we're doing our best to try and make sure that we're putting our best face forward, because we know that's also part of the marketing of our community.
That. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, unless Rich wants to make a comment. Okay. And thank you all for coming, taking time out of your day to come and share with us some of your thoughts that then we can take forward to our members and learning a little bit more about what the Business Council does. I want to thank Stan for coming today and kicking this meeting off. He's been a longtime supporter of the Business Council and of moving policies in the state of Iowa. So we appreciate that you took the time to be here today. And for our panel as well, you guys did a great job of putting this together and really highlighting the great things that Muscatine is doing that I hear from Rich about all the time. And so we appreciate that as well. So with that, thanks for coming. Hey, Stan.
Yeah.